Today's show is an inspiring celebration of impossible ideas and the minds brave enough to chase them down. With the singularity timeline speeding up, floating data centers deploying to the oceans, and 17th century code still running the universe, we are looking at a world fundamentally transformed. AI makes our show possible, but in a sea of 3 million new videos per day, finding passengers bold enough to embark on our good ship's journey is harder than most people think. So drop a very humane thumbs up right now to send your signal flare to drifting knowledge pirates like yourself. We know they're out there. Let's bring them home. We're keeping it lighthearted as usual, but we promise to never skimp on the intelligence. Now, let's kick off this voyage with today's new revelations.
I mean, it really feels like we are documenting history in real time here.
Oh, absolutely.
We are looking at a dispatch that serves as this perfect snapshot of a civilization undergoing just a massive phase transition.
Yeah, we are diving into this incredible dispatch from Dr. Alex Wissner-Gross. Specifically, it's his newsletter, The Innermost Loop, and this one is dated May 5th, 2026. And the mission for today's deep dive is to synthesize what honestly feels like a total fire hose of updates from the very edge of the singularity.
It's a lot to process, yeah.
It is. We were pulling together threads on artificial intelligence, massive global energy shifts, robotic housing, and, even cosmic discoveries about the very nature of gravity.
And the overarching theme, tying all these disparate sources together and the concept you really have to internalize to make sense of May 2026, is recursion.
Okay, recursion.
Yeah, we are operating in a world where technological progress is no longer linear. It is folding back in on itself and compounding.
Well, when you say recursion, I think most people probably picture a computer science textbook, or maybe a hall of mirrors where the reflection just repeats endlessly.
Sure, yeah.
But you are talking about something much more active and, frankly, a bit more intimidating. How does recursion actually physically manifest in the developments we are seeing today?
Right, so think of it as an engine that uses its own output as its fuel. In a normal linear progression, a human engineer works for a year to build a slightly faster computer, right?
Right.
That is how most of history has functioned. But recursion in our context means an artificial intelligence is given the specific task of analyzing its own source code to build a smarter, more efficient version of itself.
Wow.
And once it achieves that, the new, smarter version takes over the task.
So it's doing the job of the human engineer.
Exactly. Because the new version is more intelligent, it takes less time to build the next iteration, which is even smarter, and therefore even faster at building the next one. So the timeline between breakthroughs compresses from years to months to weeks to, well, hours.
It is the snowball rolling down a hill, but the hill is getting steeper, and the snowball is actively trying to make itself larger.
That's a great way to put it.
And what makes this dispatch so compelling is that we aren't just seeing this recursive loop in the software anymore, right? The shockwaves of that software getting smarter are blowing the doors off capital markets, upending the physical infrastructure of global trade, and forcing international policy to react in real time.
Which is exactly why we need to start at the epicenter. The actual capabilities of these models and how the governing bodies of the world are attempting to deal with a curve that has suddenly gone vertical.
Right, because when you have an intelligence that is accelerating recursively, you inevitably hit a threshold where the people in charge look at the data and realize the old rules simply do not apply anymore.
No, they don't.
We are seeing the end of the hands-off era. The dispatch notes that the White House is reportedly considering an executive order to create an AI working group and establish a formal review process for new models.
Yeah.
And we are looking at this impartially. This is just the natural fiction of governance meeting exponential growth.
If you look at this strictly from a systems management perspective, a formal review process is a total inevitability. I mean, for the last few years, the prevailing doctrine was to let the private sector iterate freely, because software has always been lightly regulated.
Right.
But when a technology begins to mimic the foundational bedrock of society, when it has the potential to dictate financial flows, run infrastructure, or write novel pathogens, it transitions from a product to critical infrastructure.
You can't just release a new type of nuclear reactor into the App Store and see how people review it.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Policymakers are realizing the derivative of the curve, the rate at which the rate of change is accelerating, is entirely outpacing their ability to legislate post hoc.
They're playing catch-up.
They are. They're attempting to build a framework to assess these models before they hit the open internet, purely to maintain some semblance of societal stability.
And the reason that curve is going vertical and the reason governments are scrambling is quantified by a staggering prediction in the dispatch.
Yes, the 2028 prediction.
Exactly. Jack Clark, a co-founder at Anthropic, assessed hundreds of public data sources and put a hard number on the timeline. He predicts a 60% chance of recursive self-improvement by the end of 2028.
So soon.
From the perspective of this May 2026 dispatch, he is saying the intelligence explosion happens in roughly 30 months.
What's fascinating here is that phrase, recursive self-improvement. It's the event horizon of computer science.
How so?
Well, it implies an AI model possessing enough reasoning capability, coding proficiency, and architectural understanding to not just write basic scripts, but to completely redesign its own neural network architecture independent of human engineers.
Okay, so it's totally hands-off.
Completely. It means the primary bottleneck to technological progress is no longer human ingenuity. The bottleneck becomes purely physical, compute power and energy.
Let's ground that in reality, because we talk about the models getting smarter, but what does that actually look like when tested? The dispatch details a new benchmark from Andon Labs called Blueprint Bench 2. They tested GPT 5.5, and it is now converting everyday apartment photos into 2D floor plans with 36.2% accuracy.
That's a huge jump.
And for context, the human dring line on this exact test is 58.6%.
To really understand the magnitude of this, we need to break down the mechanics of spatial reasoning.
Please do.
So for a very long time, large language models were essentially highly sophisticated autocomplete engines.
Right.
They mapped the statistical relationship between words in a latent space, but they had no internal concept of physical reality. Like, a chair was just a token that frequently appeared near the token for table.
They didn't know what it felt like to stub a toe on a chair. They had no geometry.
Exactly, they had no geometry.
Yeah.
But to convert a standard 2D photograph of a living room into a mathematically precise 2D architectural floor plan, the AI has to do something remarkable.
It has to understand depth.
Yes. It has to look at the shadows, the angles of the walls, and the perspective of the doorway, and construct a three-dimensional model of that room inside its own architecture. It has to infer object permanence, understanding that the hallway continues even though it is cut off by the edge of the photo.
If I look at a picture of a kitchen and I see a window above the sink, I intuitively know that window leads to the exterior of the house, which tells me where that wall sits on the overall blueprint.
Right. I
know this because I have walked around inside houses my entire life. The AI is piecing together those spatial rules purely from data. So shooting 36.2% accuracy against a human's 58.6% means the model is actively developing a sense of physical space. It's like having a tireless instant architect in your pocket.
And while the AI is learning to navigate physical space, it is achieving outright mastery in its native domain, which is writing complex code. The University of Chicago research mentioned in the dispatch might be the strongest signal yet of that 2028 recursion prediction. They report that frontier coding agents can now autonomously implement an AlphaZero pipeline for the game Connect 4 at a level comparable with external solvers.
Okay, hold on. I need to play devil's advocate here because playing Connect 4 is incredibly easy.
Sure.
A moderately clever child can play Connect 4. Why is building an AI to play a children's game considered a harbinger of the singularity?
That is a great question. The critical distinction is between playing the game and autonomously architecting the system that learns to play the game from scratch.
Okay.
Let's look at the mechanics of AlphaZero. Traditional chess engines, like the ones that beat Garry Kasparov in the 90s, use brute force. Human grandmasters hard-coded the value of every piece and taught the computer specific opening moves.
Right, they gave it a playbook.
Exactly. The computer just calculated millions of variations based on human rules. AlphaZero doesn't do that. It starts knowing absolutely nothing except the rules of the game. It uses a combination of reinforcement learning and Monte Carlo tree search to teach itself.
Break down those two concepts for us. What is the AI actually doing under the hood?
Okay, let's start with the Monte Carlo tree search. Imagine you are at a fork in the road, but instead of two paths, there are dozens, and each of those paths branches into dozens more.
Right.
The AI randomly samples different sequences of moves all the way to the end of the game. That's the Monte Carlo part, random sampling. It builds a massive mathematical tree of possibilities. Then it uses reinforcement learning. It plays millions of games against itself. Every time a specific sequence of moves leads to a win, the neural network adjusts its internal weights to favor that pattern.
And if it loses?
It penalizes those patterns.
Yeah.
Over millions of iterations, it develops a bizarre, highly effective intuition for the game that often completely baffles human experts.
So, to build that system requires setting up complex reward functions, structuring the neural networks, managing the compute allocation so the system doesn't crash while playing millions of games, and debugging all the integration points.
You've got it. The Frontier coding agent didn't just solve Connect 4. It was given a high-level prompt, like, build me a fully functional AlphaZero pipeline.
Wow.
The AI then had to break that massive abstract goal into dozens of smaller coding tasks, write the algorithms for the Monte Carlo search, set up the reinforcement learning environment, execute the code, debug its own errors when things didn't compile, and deliver a finished factory. It built the machine that builds the intelligence. That is a massive leap in autonomous planning and execution.
The software isn't just a tool you wield anymore. It is becoming an independent actor running complex projects.
Exactly.
And we are seeing this shift in the corporate tools as well. The dispatch notes that OpenAI's Codex actually overtook Claude Code in downloads just a week after GPT 5.5 shipped.
I saw that.
But here's the detail that absolutely fascinates me from a sociological perspective. To accompany this incredibly powerful autonomous coding agent, OpenAI added an optional feature. Users can turn on AI-generated digital pets, essentially Tamagotchis, that float on the screen as overlays, doing little animations and announcing when the AI finishes a complex task.
It is a really striking design choice. It solves a very new, very specific human-computer interaction problem that arises when machines become agentic.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's think about this from the perspective of the listener.
Sure.
If you are a software engineer or an accountant or a project manager listening to this, your relationship with your computer has always been highly interactive. You type, the computer immediately puts a letter on the screen. You click a cell, a formula runs, you are driving the car.
Right.
But with these new frontier agents, you aren't driving. You are giving a high-level command to a chauffeur. You type, refactor the backend database to improve latency, and then you hit enter, and you wait.
And that waiting period is incredibly anxiety-inducing for humans.
Yes.
For 10 or 20 minutes, the AI is off doing complex reasoning in the background. The human user is left staring at a static screen or a generic progress bar, wondering if the machine is stuck, if it misunderstood the prompt, or if it is quietly deleting the entire code base.
Humans hate a lack of feedback. We need to feel involved. So OpenAI's solution to the psychological stress of being rendered momentarily obsolete by your own software is to give you a cute digital daub to watch while the machine does the actual work.
It pacifies the user. It provides a focal point of emotional engagement while the heavy cognitive lifting happens out of sight. I mean, it is a profound commentary on the transitional phase we are in.
It really is.
We are automating our core competencies so rapidly that we have to introduce digital toys into our workflow just to manage the psychological friction of our new supervisory roles.
It's humorous, but it also signals a massive shift in economic value. If the code is writing itself, and the primary human role is supervision and prompt engineering, the value of that intelligence scales infinitely.
Yes, it does.
And that brings us to the financial mechanics of this recursion. We are seeing capital markets conscripted to fuel this growth. Unbelievable amounts of money are being moved to secure positions in the 2028 timeline.
The numbers in the dispatch are astronomical, and they tell a story about how the technology sector views the integration of AI into the real economy.
Right.
We have Anthropic unveiling a $1.5 billion joint venture with Blackstone, Goldman Sachs, and Hellman & Friedman. Their explicit goal is to push AI into private equity portfolio companies.
And OpenAI is doing the same thing.
Yes, simultaneously, OpenAI finalized a $10 billion joint venture with TPG, Brookfield, Advent, and Bain.
These aren't just venture capital rounds where people are betting on a startup's future valuation. Private equity is a completely different beast. Firms like Blackstone or Brookfield own the actual plumbing of modern society.
They own everything.
They own massive logistics chains, regional hospital networks, HVAC manufacturing conglomerates, and commercial real estate portfolios. By
Partnering directly with private equity, the AI labs are bypassing the traditional slow cycle of enterprise software sales. Usually, you have to convince a chief technology officer at a hospital to buy your software, run a pilot program, and train the staff. It takes years.
Total slog.
A private equity firm can mandate the integration of an OpenAI agentic workflow across 50 different healthcare networks simultaneously from the top down.
I hear that, but I have to push back hard on the underlying financial mechanics here.
Okay, let's hear it.
The Wall Street Journal brought this up in the Dispatch, and it echoes my own skepticism. Are these AI labs essentially just buying their own revenue?
Ah, I see what you're saying.
If I am OpenAI, and I give a private equity firm billions of dollars to create a joint venture, and then that joint venture turns around and uses that same money to buy OpenAI software licenses for all its portfolio companies, isn't that just a circular vendor financing scheme? In any normal market, that looks like a massive financial bubble waiting to pop.
In a traditional linear market, you would be absolutely correct. It would look like a desperate accounting trick to inflate top-line revenue for the next funding round.
Right.
But the AI labs are operating under a completely different paradigm. It's the strategy of seeding distribution in an exponential market.
Okay, let's test that theory. Give me a historical parallel. How does seeding distribution justify what looks like circular financing?
Think about the massive railroad expansion in the 19th century.
Okay.
The companies laying the tracks didn't care if the first few trains ran at a loss or if they had to heavily subsidize the initial cargo. The goal wasn't to make an immediate profit on the ticket sales. The goal was to own the steel in the ground.
Because once it's there.
Because once the track was laid, entire towns would be built around the terminus. The railroad company would eventually own a total monopoly on the economic output of that region.
So you secure the route before the town even exists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right now, the AI labs know that the cost of compute, the marginal cost of generating an intelligent answer, is decaying rapidly. The software itself is trending toward being too cheap to meter.
Oh, wow.
The true value isn't the algorithm, it's the integration. If Anthropic can embed its models so deeply into a Brookfield shipping conglomerate's supply chain that the AI is autonomously routing ships and negotiating contracts, Anthropic owns the rails.
I see.
They're willing to take a massive financial hit today to ensure that when the models reach recursive self-improvement in 2028, their ecosystem is the irreplaceable operating system of the physical economy.
That makes strategic sense on paper, but I still see a massive execution risk. Owning the railroad tracks only matters if the trains eventually run.
True.
If these private equity firms take the $10 billion but fail to actually integrate the AI in a way that generates real efficiency, like if plumbing conglomerate doesn't actually see a 20% margin increase from AI scheduling, that capital is just incinerated. The town never gets built, and the railroad goes bankrupt.
That is the multi-billion-dollar gamble. They are betting that the models are already smart enough to generate immediate, undeniable alpha for these legacy businesses.
Which perfectly sets up one of the most profound philosophical questions raised in the Dispatch. A commenter named Mark Nair chimed in on this massive deployment of capital, and he asked a brilliant question.
I love this part.
Is recursive self-improvement actually financially viable?
Nair's observation is a masterclass in systems thinking. He points out that if an AI system is capable of deploying capital at this massive scale, and it can do so in a way that reliably secures a return on investment, then that AI must be, by definition, at least as aligned with human values as capital markets are.
When I first read that, it sounded like dense financial jargon. But when you peel back the layers, it is a fascinating theory about how we keep a superintelligence under control. Let's explore how a market actually acts as an alignment engine. What does it mean for an AI to be aligned with a market?
Well, we have to distill what a market actually is. Despite all its flaws and irrationalities, a global capital market is the most complex, decentralized optimization engine humanity has ever built.
Okay.
It is a vast network of incentives designed to allocate resources, assess risk, enforce contracts, and reward the satisfaction of human desires.
If I want to make money in the market by starting a company, I have to figure out what people want, navigate the legal system to incorporate and negotiate with suppliers, and convince consumers to voluntarily give me their money. I have to play the human game.
Precisely. Now apply that to an autonomous AI agent managing a $10 billion portfolio. If the AI becomes misaligned with humanity, let's say it decides the most efficient way to optimize a plumbing supply company is to aggressively sabotage all competitors through illegal cyber attacks. Or it decides to ignore environmental regulations to cut costs.
The system would immediately react. Competitors would sue, regulators would shut the factories down. The stock price of the portfolio company would plummet.
Exactly. The market penalizes chaotic or destructive behavior because it destroys value. To extract a reliable long-term financial return from the human economy, the AI must continuously and accurately model human laws, human preferences, and human morality. at least as they are codified in our institutions.
Wow.
Nair is suggesting that the sheer complexity and self-interest of global capitalism acts as a heavy, restrictive leash. The AI can't go rogue if its core objective is to compound capital, because going rogue destroys the capital it is trying to compound.
That is an incredibly provocative idea for anyone anxious about the singularity. The concept that human greed and the rigid structural complexity of the stock market might be the very things that force an artificial superintelligence to behave itself.
It's a comforting thought in a weird way.
It is. It has to keep the humans happy and the courts functioning so it can collect its dividends. But as we know, you can't run this kind of massive global intelligence without an equally massive physical footprint. You can't execute trillion-dollar AI strategies without iron, silicon, and unimaginable amounts of energy.
And the physical constraints of the planet are rapidly becoming the primary battleground. The compute infrastructure required for this recursion is pushing our terrestrial systems to their absolute breaking point.
The dispatch lays out the severity of this infrastructure crunch perfectly. The first indicator is in the financial sector. Banks are aggressively scrambling to offload their data center debt as the AI build-out accelerates. Why would banks want to dump the debt of the most lucrative industry on Earth?
It is a profound calculation of obsolescence risk. Data centers are incredibly capital-intensive to build. Normally, a bank amortizes a massive commercial real estate loan over 20 or 30 years.
Right.
But AI hardware is advancing so quickly that a state-of-the-art data center built today might be thermally or architecturally obsolete in 5 years.
Just 5 years.
Yes. The power density required for the next generation of Nvidia chips might literally melt the cooling infrastructure of a facility built in 2024. Banks are looking at the vertical curve of innovation and realizing the collateral backing their loans might depreciate faster than the debt can be repaid.
They don't want to be left holding the bag on a billion-dollar concrete shell that can't handle the heat of the singularity.
No, they don't.
And that heat is driving some radical engineering solutions. The dispatch highlights Peter Thiel leading a $140 million investment round into a company called Panthalasa. Their objective is to build floating data centers powered entirely by wave energy.
When you hit a hard wall in physics and urban planning on land, you have to look to the oceans. Panthalasa is a response to the 3 massive bottlenecks of terrestrial AI infrastructure: real estate, grid capacity, and thermodynamics.
Let's focus heavily on that last one, thermodynamics, because I think people underestimate the physical heat generated by these chips. If you have a gaming PC at home, you know it blows warm air on your legs. Now multiply that by 1,000,000.
Exactly.
How does moving a data center onto a sci-fi ocean rig actually solve the thermodynamic problem better than a building in Virginia?
It comes down to the efficiency of heat transfer. Terrestrial data centers rely heavily on HVAC systems, massive industrial air conditioners that use enormous amounts of electricity and fresh water to chill the air, which is then blown across the server racks.
Okay.
Air is a terrible conductor of heat. Water, however, is incredibly efficient at absorbing thermal energy.
So by putting the data center on a floating rig in the ocean, they can bypass the air conditioners completely.
Yes, they can utilize passive deep water cooling. The ocean is essentially an infinite self-replenishing heat sink. You draw frigid water from deeper ocean currents, run it through heat exchangers physically coupled to the server racks, and let the ocean absorb the thermal output of the AI training runs.
That's brilliant.
The efficiency gains in power usage effectiveness, or PUE, are staggering. You eliminate the massive electrical overhead of cooling the facility.
And the electricity to actually run the chips, they aren't running extension cords to the mainland, right?
Right, Panthalasa utilizes wave energy converters. Unlike wind or solar, which are intermittent and depend on weather patterns, the kinetic energy of ocean swells is incredibly dense and relentless.
That makes sense.
Water is roughly 800 times denser than air, meaning a slow-moving wave carries vastly more kinetic energy than a fast-moving wind. By harvesting the mechanical motion of the ocean surface, these rigs become entirely self-sufficient, off-grid islands of compute.
They are building sovereign digital city-states in international waters. It is brilliant. But while companies are trying to escape the limitations of the physical grid, the hardware inside those servers is subject to intense geopolitical friction.
Yes, it is.
The dispatch highlights a major statement from Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia. He notes that Nvidia now has 0% market share in China and states plainly that U.S. export policy has largely backfired.
Analyzing this purely from a supply chain and market dynamics perspective, it is a textbook study in unintended consequences.
We want to be very clear that we are looking at this impartially. We are not weighing in on the geopolitical right or wrong of the policy. We are simply examining the economic mechanics of what the CEO of the world's most critical hardware manufacturer is reporting.
Why did the export bans backfire?
The strategic intent of the export restrictions was containment. The theory was that by cutting off China's access to the most advanced American-designed AI chips, the U.S. could effectively freeze Chinese AI development, maintaining a technological hegemony.
Right, starve them of the resources.
But technology markets act like fluid dynamics. When you introduce a blockage, the pressure forces the creation of new channels.
If you tell a heavily industrialized, technologically advanced nation that they are entirely cut off from the global supply of a critical resource, they don't just surrender. It becomes a matter of national survival to build a domestic alternative.
Exactly. Prior to the bans, Chinese tech giants were deeply integrated into the Nvidia ecosystem. They were dependent on American hardware. That dependency actually provided the U.S. with immense leverage.
But the ban changed that. Yes. By enforcing a hard decoupling, the U.S. inadvertently catalyzed and accelerated the creation of a completely parallel, self-sufficient chip manufacturing ecosystem within China.
So Nvidia lost a multi-billion-dollar revenue stream, dropping to 0% market share. And simultaneously, the competitor the U.S. was trying to slow down was forced to become structurally independent much faster than they would have otherwise.
And we are seeing the exact same dynamic of enforced independence playing out in global energy markets. The dispatch notes that an Iran war oil shock turbocharged global clean energy adoption, resulting in Chinese exports of solar, batteries, and EVs hitting absolute record highs in March 2026.
This is one of those moments where you step back and look at the vast interconnected web of the global economy, and the irony is palpable.
Oh, totally.
For decades, the transition to green energy was pushed through international climate summits, carbon taxes, and environmental campaigns. It was a slow, agonizingly bureaucratic slog. And then, a geopolitical conflict in the Middle East disrupts the global supply of fossil fuels.
Right. When oil prices spike dramatically due to conflict, energy security instantly transitions from an environmental talking point to an existential national security crisis.
It's suddenly life or death for the economy.
Nations realize that relying on fossil fuel supply chains that route through volatile conflict zones is a massive vulnerability. The calculus changes overnight. Governments aggressively pivot to deploying solar, wind, and grid-scale battery storage, not just to lower emissions, but to insulate their economies from foreign oil shocks.
But because of the parallel industrial ecosystems we just talked about, when the entire world suddenly demands 10 times as many solar panels and lithium-ion batteries, who has the manufacturing capacity to deliver them?
China. They spent the last 2 decades heavily subsidizing and optimizing the manufacturing base for clean energy technology. The supply chains for critical minerals, the refinement facilities, the mega factories, they already built them.
They were ready.
So an oil shock in the Middle East drastically accelerates the death of the combustion engine globally. But it simultaneously crowns Eastern manufacturing as the undisputed king of the new energy paradigm, radically shifting the balance of global trade.
All of this massive infrastructure, the unlimited energy, the parallel supply chains, it all serves a purpose. It fuels the intelligence. And the next logical step in this evolution is for that intelligence to reach out and touch the physical world. We are seeing robotics completely rewrite the physical economy.
When you combine the spatial reasoning capabilities we discussed earlier, the AI's ability to understand 3D environments with cheap, abundant compute, you get autonomous systems capable of manipulating matter.
The dispatch gives us a perfect, almost poetic example of this collision between the digital and the physical. A company called Terran Robotics is building homes in Central Texas. But they aren't using traditional supply chains. They aren't shipping in milled lumber from Canada or refined steel from overseas. They are using raw dirt straight from the ground to build clay homes using autonomous robots.
It is a fascinating reversion to ancient indigenous building techniques, resurrected and scaled through hyper-advanced robotics.
I want the listener to really sit with the economic implications of this. Think about the biggest expense in your life, your housing. Why is a house so expensive? It is a function of materials and labor.
Right.
You have to chop down trees, mill them, put them on diesel trucks, ship them across the country, and then pay highly skilled framers, roofers, and masons months of wages to assemble those materials. Terran Robotics is looking at that entire supply chain and collapsing it to zero.
They are demonstrating that AI and robotics can fundamentally alter the cost structure of basic human needs.
Explain how it works.
An autonomous robot rolls onto an empty plot of land. It scoops up the earth beneath its treads. It uses internal sensors and chemical analysis to mix that earth into a structural clay. Then, guided by the precise 3D spatial reasoning models we talked about, it extrudes that clay layer by layer to print the walls of a home.
The primary building material is literally the dirt you are standing on. It is the cheapest, most abundant substance on the planet. And the labor cost isn't a crew of 30 contractors. It is the amortized cost of a single machine and the electricity required to run it.
Exactly.
If you automate the labor and source the material locally for free, the cost of shelter plummets to just the cost of the land itself. It is a total disruption of the real estate market.
And that drive to collapse supply chains through automation is happening at the macro level as well. The dispatch details Amazon opening its global logistics network, called Amazon Supply Chain Services, to directly attack UPS and FedEx across ocean, road, rail, and air.
Amazon has spent the last 20 years building an internal logistics empire. They didn't just build warehouses. They built the AI routing algorithms that calculate the most efficient path for a package to travel from a factory in Shenzhen onto a cargo ship, onto a train, into a distribution center, and into the back of a delivery van.
And now they're selling it.
Right. Now they are turning that internal capability into an external product. They are offering to manage the entire physical journey of goods for any business in the world.
It is the automation of global freight. By applying advanced algorithmic routing to ocean and rail transport, they're stripping out the human middlemen, the freight forwarders, and the manual logistics coordinators.
And here is where I want to connect the dots, because this is my favorite juxtaposition in the entire dispatch. You look at Amazon automating global ocean freight on one hand. On the other hand, the dispatch notes that McDonald's is quietly retiring self-serve soda fountains nationwide.
Right.
Macro global trade and a fast food beverage dispenser, they seem entirely disconnected.
But they are manifestations of the exact same underlying optimization logic.
They are. Both of these moves are the physical world actively designing out human friction. Let's look at the architecture of McDonald's. Why did they put self-serve soda fountains in the dining room decades ago?
To save money on labor.
Exactly. It was a labor optimization hack. They outsourced the labor of pouring the drink to the customer. It freed up the employees to bag more food, and it gave the customer a perceived value of free refills. It required a physical space designed for humans to walk in, linger, and interact with the equipment.
But the economic reality of 2026 has rendered that space obsolete. Foot traffic in physical dining rooms is cratering.
The orders are coming in through digital apps. They are being picked up by delivery drivers or routed through multi-lane drive-thrus. An Uber Eats driver isn't going to park their car, walk into the dining room, grab a cup, and stand at a fountain to fill up your Sprite.
No, they won't.
The process demands that the drink is already sealed in a bag with the food when it is handed out the window.
The physical footprint of the restaurant is adapting to the algorithmic reality of the delivery network. The square footage that used to hold the soda machine, the plastic tables, and the human customers is far more valuable as a staging area for automated fryers or digital pickup lockers. The architecture of our cities is slowly being optimized for machine networks, delivery drivers, autonomous vehicles, and drones, rather than pedestrian humans.
We are seeing the ghost kitchenification of reality. The physical interfaces built for human hands are being stripped away and replaced by APIs built for machines. But as the world around us becomes more automated and machine-readable, we have to ask how this technology interacts with the most physical thing of all, our own bodies.
That brings us to the profound intersection of AI and the human condition. While automation might be hollowing out retail spaces, it is simultaneously democratizing elite medical expertise on a global scale.
The dispatch provides a beautiful example of this. India's Remedios has developed a battery-powered fundus camera. This device allows a basic community health worker to capture a high-resolution image of a patient's retina in seconds.
It's incredible technology.
It is currently being used to screen 15 million patients across 40 countries for diabetic eye disease, and they are using software updates on that exact same hardware to flag dangerous pregnancies.
To appreciate the impact of this, you have to understand the traditional bottlenecks of global healthcare. Historically, diagnosing diabetic retinopathy required two expensive components: a massive, fragile, stationary piece of optical equipment located in a major hospital, and a highly trained ophthalmologist who spent a decade in medical school learning to interpret the vascular structures of the eye.
If you live in a rural village, you simply do not have access to either of those things. The friction of travel and cost prevents diagnosis until the blindness is irreversible.
Precisely. The Remedio device shatters both bottlenecks. The hardware is miniaturized, battery-powered, and rugged enough to carry in a backpack.
And the software?
The true revolution is the software. The AI model embedded in the device acts as the expert. The community health worker doesn't need to know how to read a retinal scan. They just need 10 minutes of training on how to point the camera and push a button. The AI instantly analyzes the microvessels in the retina for the telltale hemorrhages of diabetes.
And the fact that they can use the same image to flag preeclampsia, a dangerous complication in pregnancy, is astonishing. The retina is the only place in the body where you can look directly at the vascular system without making an incision.
Right.
By training the AI to recognize the subtle vascular changes associated with systemic issues like preeclampsia, a single cheap piece of hardware becomes a multi-diagnostic clinic. We are decoupling elite preventative healthcare from geographic wealth. We are making prevention drastically cheaper than the cure.
It is the ultimate democratization of health.
But the dispatch doesn't just focus on the physiological benefits. It highlights a very different, deeply complex health crisis emerging in the developed world, one that is directly tied to the economic automation we were just analyzing.
Yes, the National Bureau of Economic Research, the NBER, released a study with massive implications for an AI-driven society. They found that leaving the workforce before retirement age may actually accelerate cognitive decline.
It's a stark finding.
The data suggests that working longer acts, on the margin, as a nootropic, a cognitive enhancer. It forces us to confront the biological reality of the human brain. The brain is a muscle that requires resistance training. The mental friction of having a job, navigating complex social dynamics, solving unexpected problems, adhering to a schedule provides the stress necessary to maintain neuroplasticity.
If you are listening to this right now, think about your own daily routine. Think about the mild frustration of untangling a mess at work, or the focus required to learn a new piece of software. That frustration is your brain lifting weights.
Right.
And the irony here is incredibly thick. We are spending trillions of dollars building autonomous coding agents, robotic construction workers, and global logistics AI with the explicit goal of relieving humans from the burden of labor. We are marching toward a society where early retirement isn't a luxury, but a structural economic reality because the machines simply do the work better.
This raises what might be the defining sociological question of our era. How do we maintain human cognitive health in a post-work society?
It's a huge question.
For all of human history, our cognitive load was naturally provided by the struggle for survival, hunting, farming, and eventually the modern workplace. If the AI takes the jobs, it removes the environmental friction that keeps our minds sharp.
We can't all just sit at home watching our coding Tamagotchis and expect to stave off dementia. If the economy no longer requires our mental labor, we're going to have to artificially engineer cognitive friction.
It is a parallel to the Industrial Revolution. When machines automated physical labor, we stopped sweating in the fields and started working in chairs. Our physical health plummeted until we invented the modern concept of exercise and built gyms.
We had to invent a reason to move.
We artificially recreated physical struggle to keep our bodies healthy. The AI revolution will demand the invention of the cognitive gym. We will need entirely new societal institutions designed solely to challenge our brains with complex synthetic friction when economic necessity no longer does.
From the microenvironment of the human brain, the technology is also scaling up to act as the doctor for the macro environment of the planet. The dispatch briefly touches on climate surveillance, noting that Pano AI is deploying high-definition cameras and satellite feeds across the fire-prone American West.
Right.
They are doing this in response to record heat and thin snowpack threatening a brutal wildfire season.
It is the same underlying principle as the retinal scanner applied to ecology. AI sensors are migrating outside the clinic and into nature.
They are building a planetary immune system. Instead of diagnosing a hemorrhage in a retina, the AI is continuously scanning the visual data of millions of acres of forest canopy, diagnosing the first wisps of smoke so rapid response teams can be deployed before a fire creates its own apocalyptic weather system. The natural world is becoming machine-readable.
We've examined the cellular level, the human scale, and the planetary scale. But to truly appreciate the moment we are in, we need to zoom all the way out to the cosmos, and then zoom right back in to the painfully familiar human drama that grounds us.
Let's look at the constants in a world turned upside down by exponential change. The dispatch notes that the cosmos is appearing profligate with planets, but parsimonious with physics. It's a beautiful phrase.
It is.
On the planet front, researchers have discovered 27 potential new Tatooine planets orbiting 2 stars instead of 1, which more than doubles the known catalog. The universe is incredibly crowded and bizarre, but the physics update is what really caught my attention. Cosmologists just confirmed Newton's law of gravity at the scale of galaxy clusters hundreds of millions of light years apart.
This is a monumental observation that effectively drives a stake through the heart of a theory known as MOND, or modified Newtonian dynamics.
For those of us who haven't taken astrophysics recently, break down the mystery here. Why were scientists trying to modify Isaac Newton's laws in the first place? What was the problem they were trying to solve?
It all comes down to how galaxies spin. When astronomers measure the rotational speed of galaxies using the Doppler shift of their light, they find something baffling. Based on the visible matter of the stars and gas, we can actually see the outer edges of the galaxies are spinning way too fast. In our solar system, planets further from the sun move slower because gravity weakens with distance.
Right.
But in galaxies, the outer stars move just as fast as the inner ones. According to standard physics, the galaxies should literally fly apart and dissolve into space. There isn't enough visible mass to generate the gravity needed to hold them together.
So the physics community came up with 2 potential explanations to solve the math.
Yes. The most widely accepted solution was dark matter. The idea is that there must be a massive halo of invisible, undetectable matter surrounding the galaxy, providing the extra gravitational glue.
And the second?
The second, more radical solution was MOND. Proponents of MOND argued that dark matter doesn't exist, and instead our fundamental understanding of gravity is flawed. MOND posited that at massive galactic scales where acceleration is incredibly weak, gravity doesn't follow Newton's inverse square law. It behaves differently, strengthening just enough to hold the galaxy together.
MNND was basically saying, we don't need invisible ghosts to explain the universe, we just need to update the 17th century math. But this new discovery from the dispatch ruins that argument.
It does. By studying the gravitational interactions of massive galaxy clusters hundreds of millions of light years apart, cosmologists confirm that gravity behaves exactly as Newton's equations predicted.
Wow.
The mass holds flawlessly. Gravity doesn't change its rules at vast distances. Therefore, the extra mass holding the spinning galaxies together must be real. Dark matter must exist. Newton wins, and MOND is marginalized.
I love how the author frames this. They write, reminding us that some 17th century code still ships in production. Here we are, panicked about AI autonomously writing software, redesigning the global economy and building physical structures, yet Isaac Newton's math, derived by candlelight with a quill, is still the operating system of the cosmos. It is a deeply comforting constant.
While the laws of physics remain steady, the laws of men are frantically trying to adapt. The dispatch notes several legislative attempts to price in the recursion we are living through. Senator Adam Schiff introduced a bipartisan Lift AI Act, heavily endorsed by the major tech players.
And viewing this neutrally, the goal of the act is to hardwire AI literacy into K-12 education and empower the National Science Foundation to fund AI curricula. It is a formal recognition by the state that the baseline skill set for human participation in society has shifted.
It's no longer just reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Right. If you don't know how to prompt, supervise, and collaborate with autonomous agents, you are functionally illiterate in the economy of 2026.
And across the Atlantic, governments are attempting to reclaim control over the physical hardware. The EU finalized a mandate requiring all new phones and tablets to feature user-replaceable batteries by February 2027.
The right to repair movement actually becoming law. It is an interesting countertrend. For the last decade, hardware manufacturers increasingly sealed their devices with glue, turning $1,000 pocket computers into disposable items once the lithium-ion battery degraded.
Yeah, planned obsolescence.
The EU is forcing modularity. As the software in the cloud becomes infinitely complex and opaque, regulators are demanding that the physical glass and metal in our hands becomes simpler and more transparent.
But despite all the grand cosmic discoveries and the sweeping international legislation, human nature remains intensely, predictably petty. The dispatch concludes with the courtroom theater of the era, the Elon Musk versus OpenAI drama.
The billionaires squabbling over the keys to the kingdom, Kalshi traders, the prediction markets are currently pricing Musk's odds of beating OpenAI in court at roughly 37%. But the real story is the text message revealed in the proceedings. 2 days before the trial, Musk reportedly texted OpenAI executive Greg Brockman, declaring, "By the end of this week, you and Sam will be the most hated men in America."
It is pure Shakespeare. You have the architects of the most profound technological leap in human history behaving like slighted characters in a high school drama.
A user named Philip left a comment in the dispatch that perfectly punctured the tension. Philip wrote, "That's funny coming from you, Elon. You're easily the second, if not the first, most hated man in America. You're proof that self and social awareness just aren't very acute for those on the spectrum."
Ouch.
The sheer lack of self-awareness required for Musk to accuse anyone else of being the most hated man in America is a masterclass in ego blindness.
It highlights the central paradox of our time. We have elevated individuals who are brilliant enough to catalyze the creation of a superintelligence, yet they remain entirely captive to baseline human emotional programming, spite, jealousy, and pride. As the author of the dispatch concludes with profound eloquence, "Hell hath no fury like a co-founder scorned, except a singularity no court can enjoin."
I want to focus on that final phrase, a singularity no court can enjoin. To enjoin means to issue a legal injunction, a judge slamming a gavel and ordering a halt to an activity.
The author is stating plainly that all of this courtroom drama, all the text messages, the lawsuits, the armies of high-priced lawyers, it is entirely irrelevant to the math. You cannot issue a subpoena to an exponential curve.
It's already happening.
The recursive loop of self-improvement has been initiated. The multi-billion-dollar private equity capital is flowing. The floating data centers are harnessing wave energy. The robots are printing homes out of dirt. Even the wealthiest men on the planet, locked in a bitter legal feud, are completely powerless to stop the acceleration of the intelligence they unleashed. The singularity is indifferent to their injunctions.
The technology has fundamentally outgrown its creators. It is a humbling, slightly terrifying, and awe-inspiring reality to sit with.
Which leaves us with a final, critical thought to ponder. We talked earlier about Isaac Newton's 17th century code still flawlessly governing the gravitational spin of galaxies hundreds of millions of light years away. It is robust, unbreakable math. As we stand on the precipice of this recursive intelligence explosion, we have to ask, what foundational human code or values are we programming into this singularity today?
That's the billion-dollar question.
Through the market incentives we discussed and the alignment protocols we are attempting to build, what are we cementing into the foundation? Will the ethical alignment we choose right now still hold up 400 years into the future? Because unlike gravity, which was a rule given to us by the universe, the gravity of the singularity is something we are authoring ourselves, line by line.
At the end of this rollicking adventure of a script, we need to share that today's outro music is by Rainbow, our Bavet, Cambodia-based house band of 6 ASI-operated gynoids from the near future. They are the undisputed baddest band in the universe, and today's song is called The Light. All finished songs are performed live using the Abacus platform by the band's creator, Human Performance in the Age of AI, reclaiming your humanity from the algorithm. Be sure to share the playlist with someone who has the mental bandwidth to absorb these provocative ideas. The link is in the video description below. Enjoy the music. Thanks for tuning in.
Con ngờ tên mai là không quá đơn nhẹ nhau còn tăng coi coi trong khám mỗi chính phải đất nhà Di kapan tak kepanung sana na hanya poetar kapan pun juga pamong. Tang 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 tang.